Hi everyone. In this video we are going to discuss about how to solve these three different trigonometric equations. So let's begin with the first one, which is sine of x equals cosine of x. From here, can we write it like cosine of x equals sine of x? And then can we say sine of x is equal to cosine of 90 degree minus x? And now we have a nice form here. It looks like cosine of x equals cosine of alpha. So from here, if we assume pi over 2 minus x is alpha, then we can say that the solution here would be x equals 2n pi plus or minus the alpha angle, which is in this case pi over 2 minus x. And then there are two possible cases. In the first case, let's take the positive sign. And if we simplify this, we're going to get, and also we can write it as 2n pi plus pi over 2 minus x. And then from here we can say there is an x on the left hand side and a negative x on the right hand side. So if we bring that to the left hand side, it will be 2 times x, and that will be equal to 2n pi plus pi over 2. And from here x will be equal to, if we divide both sides by 2 of course, then x will be equal to n pi plus pi over 4. Now what is the second case? Well, in the second case, let's take the negative sign, and if we remove the parenthesis, then what will happen? We will have 2n pi minus pi over 2 plus x. And now you see this x on the left hand side and the positive x on the right hand side, they are going to cancel out each other. It will look like 0 equals 2n pi minus pi over 2, which is kind of absurd. So this will not give us any solution because x is going to disappear. So this particular case is not going to give us any solution. So we have to reject the second case. So we are going to reject the second case. But from the first case, we got the value of x, which is correct, that is n pi plus pi over 4. So that is the only solution that will satisfy this particular trigonometric equation. And from here, let's also take a quick look at this. Suppose if we have to find the x as an acute angle, then what can we do? Well, we have found from here, right here, let me enclose it in a pink box here. So we see that x equals n pi plus pi over 4, where n is an integer of course. And if we use 0 for n, meaning if we use a value of 0 for n, then x will be equal to 0 times pi plus pi over 4. So that will be actually pi over 4. So there is that one acute angle which is 45 degree or pi over 4 that gives the same value of sine ratio as well as cosine ratio. And we all already know that, right? From the ratio of standard angles in trigonometry, we already know that sine of 45 degree is equal to 1 over square root of 2, and that is also equal to cosine of 45 degree. So if sine of an angle is equal to cosine of an angle and the angle is an acute angle, then the angle better be 45 degree or pi over 4. I hope that made sense. Next, we are going to solve the second equation. And what is our second equation? The second equation is sine of x equals tangent of x. Can we write the tangent of x like this? And from here, if we bring everything to the left hand side, then we have sine of x minus sine of x over cosine of x is equal to 0. And from there, if we take sine of x as a common factor, so now from the two factors, we can say that sine of x equals 0 or 1 minus 1 over cosine of x equals 0. Now when sine of x equals 0, x will be equal to n pi. So from the first factor, we can say that x will be equal to n times pi, where n is an integer. And then from the second one, let's simplify this little bit. From the second one, what we get? We can say, well, then 1 over cosine of x is equal to 1. And since cosine of x is in the denominator, x cannot be 90 degree or pi over 2. So from here, let's simplify a little bit. Let's multiply both sides by cosine of x. Then we're going to get 1 equals cosine of x. And also we can say cosine of x equals 1. And when cosine of x is equal to 1, we know that x is equal to 2n pi. And from these two solutions, we have to find out which one works for both. So from here, we can see that x can be any multiple of pi, because whether it is any multiple of pi or an even multiple of pi, the equation will be satisfied. So we are going to take any multiple of pi that will cover even multiple of pi as well as odd multiple of pi. So we are going to say then finally x will be equal to n pi. N is an integer of course. I hope it made sense. Next, we are going to solve the third equation, and our third equation is cosine of x equals tangent of x. Now, can we write tangent of x as sine of x over cosine of x? And then if we cross multiply, we are going to get cosine squared of x is equal to sine of x. And if we bring everything to the left hand side, then we can say cosine square of x minus sine of x is equal to 0. And from here, if we replace cosine square of x by 1 minus sine square of x, that's the Pythagorean identity, and then minus sine of x is equal to 0. And from here we can say, well, then 1 minus sine square of x minus sine of x is equal to 0. That's looking like a quadratic in sine of x, and if we multiply by a negative 1 on both sides, then we are going to get a positive sine square of x. I'm just rearranging. I'm multiplying by negative 1 on both sides as well as I'm rearranging. So first I'm writing the square term, so sine square of x, that will become positive, and then plus sine of x, that will also become positive, and minus 1 equals 0. And let's use the quadratic formula here. So from here we can say that sine of x is equal to negative b, which is in this case b is 1, a is also 1, and c is negative 1. Let me quickly write the quadratic formula here on the side. So if we have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, from here we can say that x will be equal to negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2 times a. So here I am using the same formula. So in this case b is actually 1, which is right here. There is no coefficient, means we have 1 right here, and a is also 1, and c is negative 1. So then we can say this is negative b, which is negative 1, plus or minus square root of b squared, that is 1 squared, b squared minus 4 times a is 1 and c is negative 1 over 2 times a, that is 2 times 1, and that can be simplified to negative 1 plus or minus square root of 1 plus 4, that is 5, so square root of 5 over 2. Now there are two possible values here. In the first case, let's take the positive sign there, so we can say sine of x equals negative 1 plus square root of 5 over 2, and that will be equal to 0.6180339887, which is less than positive 1. So this is looking like a good value for sine of x. It does not violate the range of sine of x, so this is good. I think this is acceptable. Now let's look at the second case. In this case we are going to take the negative sign, so it would be negative 1 minus square root of 5 over 2, that will be negative 1.6180339887. Now in this case you see that this value is actually less than negative 1, but I know that the value of a sine ratio can never be less than negative 1 or greater than positive 1, right? It's always in between. So this solution will not work. We have to reject this solution because it is actually less than negative 1. So this solution will not work. Let's reject this. So we have found only one solution, which is sine of x equals negative 1 plus square root of 5 over 2, which is in the case 1, right? So let's write down that solution again. We can also write it as square root of 5 minus 1 over 2. And let's assume that this is sine of alpha, right? Let's assume that this is sine of alpha, where of course sine of alpha equals this, or we can say alpha equals sine inverse of, you can say sine inverse or arc sine, whichever one you are used to do. So sine inverse of square root of 5 minus 1 over 2, that is alpha, right? So now we have it in the form of sine of x equals sine of alpha, and for this form we know the solution, and the solution is x equals n pi plus negative 1 raised to the power n times alpha. And in this case we know alpha is actually sine inverse of square root of 5 minus 1 over 2. So that is the solution here, or we can write it like this, and that is the general solution for this trigonometric equation, which is cosine of x equals tangent of x. I hope everything made sense. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.